Thank you. Thank you very much for inviting me. I don't know whether I should thank you or complain because I was just asked to speak here about 12 hours ago, out of which about 8 hours I was sleeping. And here I am trying to say something intelligent. So what I can do is to really fall back on my expertise. I have no expertise in J&K and Ladakh. I have no expertise in some of the sustainable development goals that you're talking about. But I do have a lot of expertise on developing, on town planning, architecture, heritage planning, etc. And I make an analogy there because heritage is also a value added to society. Just like you were saying, the sustainable development goal should be a value added to the process of development. If you make it sustainable development, it adds much greater value. So in a way, I'm talking about a similar thing about heritage. And I've got plenty of experience about heritage. And then the way I would like to express it is that perhaps one could learn a bit from the failures of heritage to ensure that the sustainable development goals don't fail. Now, what are the similarities? One is the intent is absolutely clear. You want to have sustainable development goals, no one will say, no, don't have it. Just like everyone wants to have heritage, no one will say, don't protect heritage. Everyone is for heritage. Everyone is for sustainable development goals. And so the intent is there. There's no, you don't have to convert anyone to believe in it. In fact, the intent is, as far as heritage is concerned, it's in the Constitution. The Directive Principles, Article 51A says that you shall protect your heritage. So it's very much in the Constitution. And I'm sure sustainable development should also be there. But so the intent is very clear. And secondly, I think the laws are also in place. In heritage, we've got very strong laws. They're for almost over 100 years. 1904 was the first act. 1958, after independence, came the Indian Act. And in 2010, we had an amendment to that act. And so the laws are there. It's very strong laws, very clear that we want to we intend to protect. In fact, the 2010 Act, one of the interesting things about that was that no one in Parliament objected to it. It was passed wholesale because the issue was, we have laws, but heritage is being lost. What do we do? And so the parliamentarians said that, look, let's have stronger laws. So there was almost a unanimous, very rare that in our argumentative society, argumentative parliament, we have unanimity. But there was unanimity, and people passed the 2010 Act, a very strong act, so strong act that later on people started saying it's draconian. But sometimes maybe draconian laws are required. And I think as far as sustainable development is concerned, we are at that position. We do know very well that if we do not follow sustainable development practices, we are doomed. So if you're saying that, if you don't have strong laws, what are we talking about? We have to have strong laws, and someone will say that it is draconian. Now, there is no alternative. So one has to say that there is the similarity. I'm drawing the similarity, saying that, look, I'm coming here without any expertise, but hopefully with a message. So we have intent, we have laws, both are there. Environmental laws are there, and I'm sure that you might say that sustainable development goals can be achieved because the laws are there. Now, why doesn't it work? I can perhaps identify 3 reasons why heritage laws have not worked. One is very clear that heritage, in spite of our intent, in spite of the laws, is seen as anti-development. And I can predict that sustainable development goals will also, at some point, be seen as anti-development. Some person is going to say, but these are not helping us. But you say, no, it's a good thing, you should do it. But no, it's not going to happen. So heritage has suffered that. In spite of everything, we have had, in spite of the draconian laws, we're still losing heritage. In fact, it is so strong, now the government is having an assault on its own laws. It's trying to amend the 2010 Act to make it weaker. And we are trying to say, look, what is our logic in all this? You intend, you have laws, and you're going to have another law to amend it to weaken it. And I'm saying that this might happen to sustainable development goals also. You'll have a good intent, good law, strong law, and suddenly you'll find that people will say that, no, it's not working. And so weaken it. Allow us to go into forests. Allow us to go into mine here. Allow us to do this. Allow us to do all that. It'll happen. So this is a sort of a experience from heritage. What's the second reason why heritage laws have not worked or heritage conservation has not worked? I think it's been mentioned before. Government works in silos. I believe there are about 53 ministries. I don't think the 53 ministries know what the other is doing. So each of the 53 ministries worked in silos. And yet we have an intent where it's supposed to be, everyone has said, synergy should be there, coordination should be there, everything should be there. But yet our system of governance, which is, as they say, very well established in a country like India, works in silos. How do we break down those silos? Extremely difficult, because we have tried for all these years to try and convince various departments. I work with town planning and saying, look, town planning and heritage planning have to go together. Cannot convince them. The town planner will say, no, we need to develop the town. And we say, but, heritage has been there 1,000 years before. Can't you develop the town keeping that 1,000-year reality in picture? No, they can't. They'll work from the logic of town planning and say, look, this is the way the town should grow. And suddenly when the town is to be built, you say, well, the road is going through the monument. Or it's happened in many places in India, etc., etc. So I think you and I, all of us are intelligent. Surely we should plan in such a way that we don't plan a road that goes through a monument and then complain that the problem is the monument, not us. We are developing. We are doing the best for the country. And yet these monuments happen to come in the way. So get rid of it. So this is the second thing. It happens because we work in silos. And the third reason I can identify is that decision making is linear. It's never seen holistically. A decision taken, then we go to B decision. B decision taken, then we go to C decision. And the last decision to be made is we go to the National Monument Authority for permission to build. And the National Monument Authority says, my God, you can't do this. You're destroying the monument. But A, B, C, D, all these decisions have already been taken. And the government, being in a hurry, has spent crores of rupees implementing those things. I'll give you a few examples, just in case you think that I'm just talking out of the hat. We have a fantastic fort here, Tughlakabad Fort. It's a nationally protected monument, amazing place. And it has got, the law says that 100 meters is protected, 300 meters is buffer, all that is there. So one day, the Power Grid Corporation goes to the DDA, who owns the land, and says, look, we want to change the land use here because we want to put up a substation. Why? For national reasons. We're Power Grid Corporation, we're bringing power to the city, to Delhi, and we got to have a substation here. And this we find is a good place to have a substation. DDA considers it and says, wonderful, yes, okay, it was supposed to be a recreation area, buffer zone to Tughlakabad. Let's change it to, institutional, and you can put your Power Grid station there. Decision taken, decision A taken, decision B taken. And then Power Grid Corporation starts building its job. Brings in power from God knows where, thousands of kilometers away, hundreds of, crores of rupees have been spent, and we come to the substation. Then they go to DDA and say, look, we want to build this substation. And there the law says that if you build a substation, you go to ASI. And ASI, the National Monument Authority. Then you see the substation and suddenly the ASI wakes up and says, you can't do this here. You're building a building here. You can't build a building here. We thought you were building wires and all, bringing power and all that. And build. But they said, what do you mean? Yes, we are supposed to. How do we transmit power without the power station? So this power station is there. And anyway, a lot of money has been spent. And they negotiate and say, okay, can you go a bit beyond here, a bit beyond there, a bit in the regulated area, and allowed to build. After the build, suddenly we see these huge 60, 70 meter towers coming up, bigger than Qutub Minar. See, where did these come from? But how do you think power is going to be transmitted? We got to have towers, we got to have wires, we got to have this. It has to come. So suddenly now if you go to Tughlakabad, you'll find these huge towers next to the fort. So I'm just saying that how did all this happen? Linear decisions? I mean, when DDA changed the land use, it did not know what it was changing. You know, very innocently it said it's changing from recreational to public, semi-public, and said, okay, we don't say anything wrong with it. It's perfectly all right. They didn't consult ASI, they didn't consult, etc. So these were, I could go on and on for many such examples. So these were three things that I just thought that I should point out. So what can we do? And a very short, this thing, what we can do. Perhaps decision-making system has to change. If we are talking about J&K and Ladakh and saying that, okay, we are almost on point at the beginning, let us think of decision-making differently. Can we do things differently? And here I'll just tell you a small thing I read in the papers yesterday. The Canadian government has a ministry called the Ministry for Welfare of Middle Class. They have Ministry of Welfare of Middle Class. That makes a lot of sense. Why do governments work? For the welfare of people. So they have a ministry for benefit of the middle class. And how does this ministry operate? It operates by having people in every department. So any decision, any department of the Canadian government works has to negotiate with the Ministry of Welfare of Middle Class. And he says or she says that this works, this doesn't work, don't do this, do this. And I thought that's brilliant. Why don't we have a similar thing for SDG? Why don't we have the Ministry of SDG in every department of the government? And any decision that's taken, SDG's person should say, no, this doesn't work, this is anti this, or this, do this and might work, etc. So I'll just end there with saying that with the thought that perhaps if we change the system of governance and maybe, shall we say, infect the ministry with goals of SDG, maybe the disease would be better than the problem we have today. Thank you.